In a world where first impressions can make or break careers, where military hierarchies are built on respect and proven capability, one woman's journey from mockery to recognition would challenge everything her superiors thought they knew about strength, determination, and the true meaning of service. She entered the room that day carrying the weight of whispered insults, the sting of being labeled deadweight by her own unit. Her colleagues saw weakness where she saw opportunity, failure where she saw lessons, and limitations where she saw potential waiting to be unlocked. But sometimes, the most powerful transformations happen in the most unexpected moments, when someone finally looks beyond the surface and sees what was always there. What they discovered that day wasn't just a soldier who had been underestimated. What they found was a story that would redefine their understanding of what it means to serve, to sacrifice, and to carry the invisible burdens that make heroes out of ordinary people. This is the story of how a single glance at a tattoo changed not just one person's military career, but the hearts and minds of everyone who had written her off. Because sometimes the most important battles aren't fought on foreign soil, they're fought in the spaces between judgment and understanding, between assumption and truth. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, and this is how she proved that being called deadweight was just the beginning of her story, not the end. Sarah Mitchell wiped the sweat from her forehead as she struggled to keep pace with her unit during the morning run at Fort Campbell. Her breathing was labored, her legs felt like concrete, and she could hear the whispered comments from the soldiers behind her. At 23 years old, she had enlisted in the army with dreams of serving her country and proving herself capable of anything her male counterparts could do. Instead, she found herself constantly falling short of the physical standards that seemed to come naturally to everyone else. "Come on, Mitchell, my grandmother could move faster than that," Sergeant Rodriguez called out as he jogged past her effortlessly. The other soldiers chuckled, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She had heard variations of this comment dozens of times over the past 6 months since arriving at the base. What hurt most wasn't the criticism itself, but the way it had evolved from constructive feedback to something that felt more like bullying. The morning run was just the beginning of what would be another challenging day. As the unit completed their circuit around the base, Sarah found herself trailing behind the main group by nearly 50 meters. She pushed herself harder, her heart pounding against her chest, but the gap only seemed to widen. When they finally reached the finish line, most of her unit was already stretching and preparing for the next activity while she was still catching her breath. Captain Williams, their commanding officer, approached the group with his usual stern expression. He was a decorated veteran who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and commanded respect through both his experience and his no-nonsense approach to training. As his eyes swept over the assembled soldiers, they lingered on Sarah for a moment longer than the others. "All right, listen up," he announced. "Today we're running combat simulations in preparation for next month's deployment readiness assessment. I need everyone operating at peak performance because lives depend on the weakest link not breaking under pressure." His gaze seemed to find Sarah again as he spoke the words, "weakest link," and she felt her stomach drop. The combat simulation involved a series of obstacles, tactical maneuvers, and teamwork exercises designed to test both individual skills and unit cohesion. Sarah knew from past experience that these exercises would highlight every area where she struggled to keep up. As the soldiers began preparing their gear, she overheard Corporal Jenkins speaking to Private Torres in what he thought was a quiet voice. "I don't know why they keep her around," Jenkins said, checking his weapon. "She's just deadweight. In a real combat situation, she'd get people killed trying to protect her instead of focusing on the mission." Torres nodded in agreement. "I heard Captain Williams is thinking about recommending her for a transfer to a support role. Probably should have happened months ago." Sarah pretended not to hear them, but the words hit her like physical blows. Deadweight. The term had been whispered behind her back for weeks, but hearing it spoken so casually made it feel official somehow. She busied herself with her equipment, double-checking everything to avoid meeting anyone's eyes. The tactical vest felt heavier than usual as she strapped it on, and her rifle seemed awkward in her hands despite months of training. The first exercise involved navigating an obstacle course while under simulated enemy fire. Soldiers had to crawl under barbed wire, climb over wooden walls, and sprint between covered positions, while instructors used blank rounds and pyrotechnics to create a realistic combat environment. Sarah watched as her teammates moved through the course with practiced efficiency, their movements smooth and confident. When her turn came, she approached the starting line with determination. The instructor gave the signal, and she began crawling under the first wire obstacle. The dirt and gravel scraped against her uniform as she pulled herself forward using her elbows and knees. She could hear the pop of blank rounds firing overhead and the shouts of instructions from the sidelines. The noise was overwhelming, designed to simulate the chaos of actual combat. At the wall climb, Sarah struggled to pull herself up and over the 8-foot barrier. Her upper body strength had improved since basic training, but it still wasn't enough to execute the movement with the speed and confidence shown by her peers. She could feel eyes watching her as she made a second attempt, finally managing to scramble over the top. By the time she reached the final sprint, she was breathing heavily, and her movements had become less precise. Her overall time was nearly 3 minutes slower than the unit average, placing her dead last once again. As she walked back to the waiting area, she could see the disappointed expressions on her teammates' faces. Some looked annoyed, others appeared sympathetic, but none looked impressed. Captain Williams made notes on his clipboard without comment, but his expression spoke volumes. The afternoon brought weapons training and tactical formation exercises. These activities required precise coordination between team members, with each soldier playing a specific role in larger strategic movements. Sarah found herself repeatedly out of position or a step behind the others, forcing the entire unit to slow down or adjust their plans to accommodate her limitations. During a building clearing exercise, she was assigned to cover the rear while her teammates advanced through a simulated hostile structure. The role required her to maintain visual contact with the team while watching for threats from behind. However, her positioning was slightly off, creating a gap in their coverage that the instructors immediately identified as a tactical error. "Mitchell, you're supposed to be protecting our 6, not giving the enemy a clear shot at our backs," Sergeant Rodriguez explained with barely concealed frustration. "In a real situation, that kind of mistake gets people killed." Sarah nodded and adjusted her position, but the damage was already done. She could see the doubt in her teammates' eyes and feel the weight of their concern. They weren't just worried about her performance. They were worried about how her limitations might affect their own survival in a real combat situation. As the day's exercises concluded, the unit gathered for debriefing. Captain Williams reviewed the various activities, highlighting successes and identifying areas for improvement. When he mentioned the communication breakdowns and timing issues that had affected several exercises, his eyes found Sarah once again. "Some of you are not meeting the standards required for combat deployment," he said. "This isn't just about individual performance. It's about unit effectiveness and the safety of everyone in this room. Those who cannot keep up need to seriously consider whether they belong in an infantry unit." The message was clear, even if her name hadn't been mentioned directly. Sarah felt her dreams of proving herself in combat beginning to crumble. She had joined the army to serve her country and demonstrate that women could excel in any military role, but instead she was becoming the example her critics used to argue against women in combat positions. After dismissal, Sarah returned to her barracks room feeling defeated. Her roommate, Private Lisa Chen, was already there preparing for the evening meal. Lisa had arrived at the base around the same time as Sarah, but she had adapted to military life much more successfully. She was smaller than Sarah but stronger, faster, and more confident in every aspect of their training. "Rough day?" Lisa asked, looking up from the letter she was writing to her family. Sarah sat heavily on her bunk and began removing her tactical gear. "They think I'm deadweight," she said quietly. "Maybe they're right." Lisa set down her pen and turned to face her roommate. "You can't give up, Sarah. Everyone struggles with different things. You're one of the smartest people in our unit, and your attention to detail is incredible. Those are valuable skills too." "Intelligence doesn't matter if I can't keep up physically," Sarah replied. "In combat, physical limitations get people killed. I heard Jenkins and Torres talking today. They think I should be transferred to a support role." "Would that be so bad?" Lisa asked gently. "There are plenty of important jobs in the military that don't require being on the front lines." Sarah shook her head firmly. "I didn't join the army to hide behind a desk. I joined to serve alongside the best soldiers in the world and prove that women can do anything. If I accept a transfer now, I'm just confirming every stereotype about why women don't belong in combat units." That evening, Sarah skipped dinner and instead went to the base gymnasium. The facility was mostly empty, with only a few soldiers working out on their own time. She spent 2 hours pushing herself through cardio exercises and strength training, trying to identify ways to improve her physical performance. Her muscles ached and her lungs burned, but she refused to stop until the gym's closing time forced her to leave. As she walked back to the barracks, she passed Captain Williams's office and noticed the light was still on. Through the partially open door, she could see him working at his computer, probably completing reports from the day's exercises. For a moment, she considered knocking and asking for guidance, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. What would she say? That she was struggling and needed help? That would only confirm his suspicions about her readiness for deployment. Back in her room, Lisa was already asleep. Sarah sat on her bunk and stared at the small mirror mounted on the wall. The woman looking back at her appeared tired and discouraged, far from the confident soldier she had imagined herself becoming. She thought about her family back home in Ohio, particularly her younger brother David, who had always looked up to her. He had been so proud when she enlisted, telling all his friends about his sister, who was going to be a combat soldier. Sarah rolled up the sleeve of her shirt and looked at the tattoo on her left wrist. It was a simple design, a small anchor surrounded by the words, "Steady as she goes," in elegant script. She had gotten it during leave after basic training, choosing the anchor as a symbol of stability and strength. The phrase was something her grandfather used to say when life got difficult. He had been a Navy veteran who served in Vietnam, and his stories of military service had inspired her own decision to enlist. The tattoo was usually hidden by her uniform sleeves, and she rarely thought about it during the busy days of training and exercises. But in quiet moments like this, when doubt crept in and she questioned her choices, she would look at it and remember why she had joined the military in the first place. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone else. It was about serving something larger than herself and honoring the family tradition of military service. As she prepared for bed, Sarah made a decision. Tomorrow would be different. She would train harder, focus more intensely, and find a way to improve her performance. The comments about being deadweight had stung, but they had also motivated her. She refused to be the reason someone else got hurt, and she refused to give up on her dreams without exhausting every possible effort to succeed. The next morning came early, as it always did in the army. Sarah woke before her alarm and immediately began her personal fitness routine. She had started getting up 30 minutes earlier than required, using the extra time for additional physical training. The routine included push-ups, sit-ups, and running in place, followed by stretching exercises designed to improve her flexibility and reduce the risk of injury. By the time Lisa woke up, Sarah was already dressed and reviewing their schedule for the day. "You're up early again," Lisa observed, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "Can't afford to waste time," Sarah replied, lacing up her boots. "Today's the urban warfare simulation. I want to be ready." The urban warfare simulation was one of the most complex training exercises they conducted. It involved multiple teams working together to secure and clear a mock city environment while dealing with simulated civilian populations, improvised explosive devices, and enemy combatants. The exercise required not just physical capability, but also quick thinking, communication skills, and the ability to make split-second decisions under pressure. As the unit assembled for the morning briefing, Sarah noticed that Captain Williams seemed particularly serious. The urban warfare simulation was considered a crucial test of combat readiness, and their performance would directly influence decisions about deployment assignments and unit composition. "Today's exercise will test everything you've learned over the past several months," Captain Williams announced. "You'll be working in small teams, and every member of each team must contribute effectively for the mission to succeed. There's no room for weak links in urban combat." Sarah felt the familiar knot form in her stomach as he spoke. The phrase, "weak links," seemed directed at her, even though he hadn't made eye contact. She was assigned to Team Bravo, along with Sergeant Rodriguez, Corporal Jenkins, and Private Torres, the same soldiers who had been most vocal about their concerns regarding her performance. As they prepared their equipment and reviewed their mission objectives, Jenkins approached her with an expression that was difficult to read. "Look, Mitchell," he said quietly, "I know we haven't always been supportive, but today is important. We need everyone to perform at their best." Sarah nodded, understanding the underlying message. This was her chance to prove herself or confirm their doubts. There would be no middle ground in an exercise this complex and demanding. As she checked her weapon and adjusted her gear, she thought about the anchor tattoo hidden beneath her sleeve and whispered her grandfather's words, "Steady as she goes." The mock city sprawled before them like a concrete maze, complete with narrow alleyways, multi-story buildings, and hidden corners that could conceal threats or civilians. Sarah adjusted her helmet as Team Bravo approached their assigned sector, a residential area where they were tasked with locating and securing a high-value target while minimizing civilian casualties. The morning sun cast long shadows between the buildings, creating a realistic atmosphere of uncertainty and tension. Sergeant Rodriguez gathered the team for a final briefing before they entered the simulation zone. His expression was all business, but Sarah could detect an undercurrent of concern in his voice as he outlined their approach strategy. They would move in a diamond formation with Rodriguez taking point, Jenkins covering the right flank, Torres on the left, and Sarah responsible for rear security and communication with command. "Remember, this isn't just about getting to the objective," Rodriguez emphasized. We need to demonstrate tactical awareness, proper clearing procedures, and coordinated movement. The instructors are evaluating every decision we make, so think before you act. As they moved into the first building, Sarah found herself hyper-aware of every sound and movement around her. The structure was designed to simulate a typical Middle Eastern residential building, with narrow stairwells, multiple rooms, and plenty of places for threats to hide. The team moved methodically from room to room, using hand signals and whispered communications to maintain stealth. Sarah's role as rear security required her to constantly monitor their path of retreat while staying connected with the team's forward progress. It was a position that demanded excellent situational awareness and the ability to multitask effectively under pressure. She found herself settling into the rhythm of the exercise, her nerves calming as training took over. The first floor cleared without incident, but as they moved to the second level, the simulation began in earnest. Smoke grenades created limited visibility, recorded gunfire echoed through the hallways, and actors playing civilian roles added complexity to every room they entered. Sarah watched Rodriguez and Jenkins work together to clear a bedroom while she maintained overwatch on the stairwell they had used to reach the floor. It was then that she noticed movement in the building across the street. A figure in civilian clothing was visible through a third-story window, but something about their posture and positioning suggested they might be more than just a bystander. Sarah raised her weapon and focused through her scope, trying to determine whether the figure posed a threat to her team. The person in the window was holding what appeared to be a cell phone, but their angle and attention seemed focused on her team's position rather than a normal conversation. In real combat situations, cell phones were often used to coordinate attacks or detonate improvised explosive devices. Sarah had to make a decision: alert her team to a potential threat, or continue monitoring to gather more information. She chose to trust her instincts. Using hand signals, she alerted Rodriguez to the potential threat. He immediately redirected Jenkins to cover the window while they completed their sweep of the current building. The coordination was smooth and professional, exactly the kind of teamwork that training was designed to develop. As they moved to the third floor of their target building, the exercise intensified further. Pyrotechnics created the sound and flash of explosions, and the actors playing enemy combatants became more aggressive in their simulated attacks. Sarah found herself separated from the main team when a smoke grenade limited visibility in the hallway, forcing her to rely on sound and communication to maintain contact. It was during this confusion that she heard something that made her blood run cold. The sound of someone in distress coming from a room the team had already cleared. The protocols were clear about not returning to areas that had been secured, but the sound suggested that either they had missed something critical or the situation had changed since their initial sweep. Sarah made another split-second decision. She broke protocol and moved back toward the source of the distress call, her weapon ready and her senses alert for any signs of ambush. What she found was an actor playing a wounded civilian who had been missed during the initial room clearing. The person was positioned behind an overturned table in a corner that would have been difficult to see during a quick sweep. The discovery was significant for several reasons. First, it demonstrated the importance of thorough clearing procedures and the dangers of assuming an area was completely secure. Second, it provided valuable intelligence about the layout and potential threats in their operational area. Most importantly, it showed that sometimes following instincts and adapting to changing circumstances was more valuable than rigidly following predetermined plans. Sarah immediately called for medical support and established security around the wounded civilian while waiting for the rest of her team to return. When Rodriguez and the others arrived, their expressions showed surprise and grudging respect. They had been following the exercise script, but Sarah had identified a scenario that required improvisation and independent thinking. "Good catch, Mitchell," Rodriguez said as the medical team arrived to evacuate the simulated casualty. "That could have been a real problem if we'd left the area without conducting a proper search." The exercise continued with increased intensity as Team Bravo moved toward their primary objective. The target building was a 3-story structure that intelligence reports indicated contained their high-value target, along with several armed guards and possible civilians. The approach required careful coordination and precise timing to avoid civilian casualties while successfully completing their mission. Sarah found herself assigned to provide overwatch from a building across the street while the rest of the team executed the actual assault. It was a critical role that required her to identify threats, provide early warning of enemy reinforcements, and offer covering fire if the assault team encountered resistance. The position also allowed her to observe the entire operation and provide real-time intelligence to command. As she established her overwatch position, Sarah felt more confident than she had during any previous training exercise. The role suited her analytical nature and attention to detail, allowing her to contribute meaningfully to the team's success without relying primarily on physical capabilities. She methodically scanned the surrounding area, identifying potential threats and escape routes while monitoring radio communications from the assault team. The assault itself went smoothly until the team encountered unexpected resistance on the second floor of the target building. Enemy actors had positioned themselves in a defensive formation that made direct assault extremely dangerous. Rodriguez called for support, and Sarah found herself in a position to provide crucial assistance. From her elevated position, she could see enemy movements that were invisible to the assault team. She provided precise information about enemy positions, allowing Rodriguez to adjust his approach and avoid walking into a trap. Her communications were clear and professional, demonstrating the kind of tactical awareness that training was designed to develop. "Bravo 1, this is Overwatch," she reported. "I have eyes on 2 enemy positions in the northwest corner of the target building, second floor. Recommend approaching from the eastern stairwell to avoid their fields of fire." The information allowed the assault team to successfully complete their mission while avoiding casualties. When the exercise concluded, the instructors gathered both teams for immediate debriefing. Their comments focused on several key successes, including the discovery of the missed civilian, the effective use of Overwatch support, and the quality of tactical communications throughout the operation. Captain Williams approached Team Bravo as they prepared to move to the next phase of training. His expression was more neutral than usual, and Sarah found herself wondering whether her performance had been adequate or if she had simply managed to avoid major mistakes. "Mitchell," he said, addressing her directly for the first time in weeks, "your Overwatch work was solid today. Good situational awareness and clear communications. That's exactly the kind of support work that keeps assault teams alive." The comment was brief and professional, but it represented the first positive feedback Sarah had received from Captain Williams since arriving at the base. She felt a surge of confidence that was immediately tempered by uncertainty about what it meant for her future assignments. Was he recognizing her potential, or was he suggesting that support roles were more appropriate for her skills? The afternoon brought additional urban warfare scenarios, each designed to test different aspects of tactical operations. Sarah found herself rotating through various positions within the team structure, sometimes providing security, sometimes handling communications, and occasionally taking point during building clearing operations. Her performance varied depending on the specific requirements of each role, but overall she felt more competent and confident than during previous exercises. During a particularly complex scenario involving hostage rescue, Sarah was assigned to provide medical support for the team. The role required her to establish and maintain a casualty collection point while monitoring the tactical situation and preparing to treat wounded team members. It was demanding work that combined medical knowledge, tactical awareness, and the ability to work under extreme pressure. When Corporal Jenkins was designated as a simulated casualty during the rescue operation, Sarah found herself providing first aid while enemy actors continued to engage the team. The scenario required her to treat his wounds while maintaining security and coordinating with the rest of the team. Her performance was methodical and effective, demonstrating that she could function competently even in high-stress situations. "Not bad for Deadweight," Jenkins said with a slight smile, as she finished applying a simulated pressure bandage to his arm. The comment was clearly meant as a joke, but it reminded Sarah that her reputation within the unit was still largely defined by her earlier struggles. As the urban warfare simulation concluded, the instructors gathered all participating teams for a comprehensive debriefing. They reviewed video footage from various scenarios, highlighting both successful tactics and areas for improvement. Sarah watched herself on screen and was surprised to see that her movements appeared more confident and professional than she had expected. The feedback from instructors was generally positive, with several specific mentions of effective teamwork and tactical decision-making. When her Overwatch work was highlighted as an example of proper support techniques, Sarah felt a genuine sense of accomplishment. For the first time since arriving at the base, she had contributed meaningfully to her team's success without being a liability. After the debriefing, Team Bravo gathered informally to discuss their performance and prepare for the next day's training. The atmosphere was more relaxed than usual, and Sarah found herself included in conversations that had previously excluded her. Rodriguez even asked for her opinion on potential improvements to their communication procedures, treating her input as valuable rather than irrelevant. "You know, Mitchell," Torres said as they cleaned their weapons, "you're actually pretty good at the tactical stuff when you're not trying to keep up with the physical requirements. Maybe we've been focusing on the wrong things." The observation was perceptive and honest. Sarah had been so focused on trying to match her teammates' physical capabilities that she had undervalued her own strengths in areas like situational awareness, analysis, and communication. The urban warfare simulation had provided opportunities to demonstrate those skills in ways that previous exercises had not. As evening approached, Sarah returned to her barracks with a sense of cautious optimism. The day had not completely changed her status within the unit, but it had provided evidence that she could contribute meaningfully to team operations when assigned appropriate roles. She began to wonder whether her struggles had been due to poor role assignment rather than fundamental inadequacy as a soldier. Lisa was waiting with news about the next phase of their training. They would be participating in a joint exercise with Special Operations units, an opportunity that was typically reserved for the most promising soldiers. The fact that their entire unit had been selected suggested that their recent performance had been noted by higher-level commanders. "This is huge, Sarah," Lisa said excitedly. "Joint exercises with special ops teams are incredibly rare. It means they're considering us for advanced assignments." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Joint exercises with elite units would expose her to even higher standards and more demanding expectations. If she struggled to keep up with her current unit, how would she perform alongside soldiers who represented the absolute best the military had to offer? That night, as she prepared for bed, Sarah looked once again at her anchor tattoo. The day had provided her first real taste of success and recognition, but she knew that greater challenges lay ahead. The phrase, "steady as she goes," had never felt more relevant as she prepared for whatever tests awaited her in the days to come. She had proven to herself and others that she could contribute meaningfully when given appropriate opportunities. The question now was whether she could build on that success and establish herself as a valuable member of the team, rather than someone who was merely not a complete liability. The joint exercise would provide answers, but for the first time in months, Sarah felt genuine hope about her military future. The Special Operations compound looked different from the regular training facilities Sarah had grown accustomed to. Everything appeared more serious, more purposeful, with an attention to detail that reflected the elite nature of the units stationed there. As her team's transport vehicle pulled through the security checkpoint, Sarah could see soldiers moving with a precision and confidence that was immediately recognizable as belonging to America's most elite fighting forces. General Marcus Thompson was waiting to greet the visiting units, his presence commanding immediate respect from everyone in the area. Sarah had heard stories about the general's distinguished service record, including his leadership during some of the most challenging operations in recent military history. He was known for his tactical brilliance, his ability to inspire soldiers under extreme pressure, and his reputation for recognizing potential in unexpected places. As the soldiers assembled for the opening briefing, Sarah found herself studying the Special Operations personnel who would be working alongside them during the exercise. They moved with an economy of motion that spoke of years of intensive training and real-world experience. Their equipment was pristine but well used, and their expressions reflected the kind of confidence that came from knowing they could handle whatever challenges they might face. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Thompson began, his voice carrying easily across the assembled group, "you've been selected for this joint exercise because your units have demonstrated the potential for advanced operations. Over the next 3 days, you'll be working alongside some of our most experienced special operations teams to test your capabilities in complex, multifaceted scenarios." Sarah felt her pulse quicken as he continued. This was an opportunity that most soldiers never experienced, a chance to work directly with the military's elite units and demonstrate her capabilities on a much larger stage. At the same time, she was acutely aware that any mistakes or limitations would be magnified in this environment. The first exercise was a reconnaissance mission that required teams to gather intelligence about a simulated enemy compound while avoiding detection. Sarah was assigned to work with Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, a Special Forces operator with extensive experience in both conventional and unconventional warfare. Santos had a reputation for excellence that was legendary even among her elite peers. "Tell me about your background, Mitchell," Santos said as they prepared their equipment for the mission. Her tone was professional but not unfriendly, suggesting that she was genuinely interested in understanding Sarah's capabilities rather than making judgments based on preconceptions. Sarah provided a brief summary of her training and recent experiences, including her struggles with physical standards and her improving performance in tactical and analytical roles. Santos listened without interruption, her expression revealing nothing about her thoughts regarding Sarah's background. "Physical fitness is important," Santos said when Sarah finished, "but it's not the only factor that determines success in special operations. Some of our most effective operators succeed because of their ability to think clearly under pressure, not because they can run the fastest or lift the most weight." The comment was encouraging, but Sarah knew that words were meaningless without performance to back them up. As they moved out for the reconnaissance mission, she focused on demonstrating the skills that had served her well during the urban warfare simulation: attention to detail, situational awareness, and clear communication. The target compound was located in a heavily wooded area that provided excellent concealment, but also created challenges for observation and movement. Sarah and Santos worked together to identify observation positions that would provide good visibility while minimizing their risk of detection. The collaboration felt natural and productive, with Santos treating Sarah as a competent partner rather than a liability to be managed. As they established their primary observation post, Sarah found herself settling into a routine that felt familiar from her successful Overwatch work during previous exercises. She systematically scanned the compound, noting patterns of activity, identifying key personnel, and documenting defensive positions. The notes were detailed and well organized, providing a comprehensive picture of the target area. Santos observed Sarah's work with professional interest, occasionally offering suggestions or asking questions about her observations. The interaction was educational rather than evaluative, suggesting that Santos was more interested in helping Sarah improve than in testing her limitations. "You have good instincts for this kind of work," Santos commented, as Sarah identified a concealed guard position that had been missed during their initial scan. "Intelligence gathering requires patience and attention to detail. Those are skills that can't be taught if someone doesn't have the natural aptitude." The recognition meant more to Sarah than any previous praise she had received. Santos was someone whose opinion carried weight throughout the special operations community, and her positive assessment suggested that Sarah might have capabilities that extended beyond basic infantry operations. As the reconnaissance mission continued, Sarah found herself taking on increasing responsibility for intelligence analysis and reporting. Santos gradually shifted from directly supervising her work to allowing her to operate independently while providing guidance and feedback. The progression felt natural and built Sarah's confidence in ways that previous training had not accomplished. During the final phase of the reconnaissance mission, they encountered an unexpected development, evidence that the simulated enemy had changed their defensive positions since the initial intelligence briefing. Sarah was the first to notice discrepancies between current observations and the information they had been provided, raising questions about whether their mission parameters needed to be adjusted. "Good catch," Santos said after reviewing Sarah's analysis. "This is exactly the kind of adaptability that separates effective operators from those who just follow scripts. You identified a significant change in the situation and provided recommendations for how to address it. The feedback was professional and specific, focusing on skills and decision-making rather than personality or effort." Sarah realized that Santos was evaluating her potential for advanced operations based on criteria that were different from those used in basic infantry training. Physical capabilities remained important, but they were balanced against analytical skills, judgment, and the ability to function independently under pressure. As they completed their reconnaissance mission and prepared to return to base, Sarah felt a sense of accomplishment that was different from her previous successes. She had worked effectively alongside an elite operator and contributed meaningfully to a complex mission. More importantly, she had demonstrated capabilities that suggested potential for roles beyond basic infantry operations. The debriefing session that followed was unlike anything Sarah had experienced during her military training. Instead of focusing primarily on mistakes and areas for improvement, the instructors spent considerable time discussing successful techniques and effective decision-making. Sarah's intelligence analysis was specifically highlighted as an example of thorough and professional work. General Thompson attended the debriefing session, asking detailed questions about various aspects of the mission and the performance of different team members. When he asked Sarah to explain her analysis of the defensive position changes, she provided a clear and comprehensive explanation that demonstrated both technical knowledge and practical judgment.
"Interesting assessment, Specialist Mitchell," the general said after she completed her explanation.
"Your analysis identified a potential vulnerability in our original approach that could have compromised the mission. That kind of thinking is valuable in any operational environment." The comment was brief but significant. General Thompson was known for providing feedback that was both honest and constructive, and his positive assessment carried weight throughout the special operations community. Sarah felt a surge of confidence, but she also recognized that one successful mission did not guarantee future opportunities. The second day of the joint exercise brought new challenges in the form of a complex hostage rescue scenario. Sarah was assigned to work with Captain James Rodriguez, a special operations team leader with extensive experience in direct action missions. The scenario required precise coordination between multiple teams, with each element responsible for specific aspects of the overall operation. Captain Rodriguez approached the mission with the kind of methodical planning that Sarah had come to associate with elite units. He spent considerable time reviewing intelligence reports, studying facility layouts, and identifying potential complications that might arise during the operation. Sarah found herself included in the planning process as a full participant, rather than simply receiving instructions. I understand you've been working on intelligence analysis and tactical communications, Rodriguez said as they reviewed the mission parameters. Those are critical skills for this type of operation. I want you to focus on maintaining situational awareness for our element while we're conducting the rescue. The assignment was challenging, but within Sarah's demonstrated capabilities. She would be responsible for monitoring radio communications, tracking the positions of other teams, and providing updates about changing situations that might affect their mission. It required the kind of multitasking and analytical thinking that had proven to be her strengths. As the mission commenced, Sarah found herself operating in a support role that was essential to the team's success. She established a communication center in their staging area and began tracking the progress of various elements as they moved into position around the target facility. Her work required constant attention and quick decision-making as situations developed rapidly throughout the operational area. The rescue operation itself was a complex choreographed effort involving multiple entry points, coordinated timing, and rapid evacuation procedures. Sarah's role was to maintain communications between the various elements while monitoring for any developments that might require adjustments to the original plan. It was demanding work that required both technical skills and the ability to remain calm under pressure. During the most critical phase of the operation, when the assault teams were actually entering the facility, Sarah identified a potential problem. Communications from one of the elements had become intermittent, suggesting either equipment failure or that they had encountered unexpected resistance. She immediately notified Captain Rodriguez and began attempting to re-establish contact through alternative channels. Her quick identification of the communications problem allowed the command element to deploy backup communications equipment and maintain coordination during the most dangerous part of the mission. The incident demonstrated the kind of vigilance and problem-solving that could mean the difference between success and failure in real-world operations. Outstanding work on the communications monitoring, Rodriguez told her after the mission concluded successfully. Your identification of the equipment failure prevented what could have been a serious coordination problem. That's exactly the kind of support work that makes complex operations possible. The feedback was specific and meaningful, focusing on her contribution to the team's overall success rather than her individual performance in isolation. Sarah began to understand that her value as a soldier might lie in her ability to enhance the capabilities of others rather than in matching their individual physical achievements. The final day of the joint exercise brought the most challenging scenario yet, a multi-phase operation that combined reconnaissance, direct action, and support elements in a coordinated mission. Sarah was assigned to work directly with General Thompson's command element, providing intelligence analysis and tactical communication support for the overall operation. Working at the command level provided Sarah with a comprehensive view of how complex military operations were planned and executed. She observed how different elements were coordinated, how decisions were made based on changing information, and how successful operations required contributions from soldiers with diverse skills and specialties. General Thompson included her in planning discussions and asked for her input on various aspects of the operation. Her previous reconnaissance work had established her credibility, and her communications experience made her a valuable member of the planning team. For the first time since joining the military, Sarah felt like she was being evaluated based on her actual contributions rather than her ability to meet predetermined physical standards. As the operation commenced, Sarah found herself responsible for maintaining the common operational picture for the command element. This involved tracking the positions and status of multiple teams, analyzing incoming intelligence reports, and providing updates to decision-makers. It was complex work that required constant attention and quick analysis of changing information. During the most critical phase of the operation, when several elements were conducting simultaneous actions in different locations, Sarah noticed a pattern in enemy movements that suggested they might be planning a counterattack against one of the isolated teams. Her analysis indicated that the team was potentially walking into an ambush that had not been anticipated during the original planning. She immediately brought her concerns to General Thompson, providing a detailed explanation of her analysis and recommendations for how to address the potential threat. The general listened carefully to her assessment and asked several clarifying questions before making the decision to redirect additional support to the potentially threatened element. The intervention proved to be crucial. The team did encounter the anticipated resistance, but the additional support allowed them to complete their mission successfully while avoiding casualties. Sarah's analytical work had identified a developing threat and provided decision-makers with the information they needed to respond effectively. After the exercise concluded, General Thompson approached Sarah for a private conversation. His expression was serious but not unfriendly, suggesting that he had something important to discuss with her about her performance and potential future in the military. General Thompson's office was spartanly decorated, with only a few commendations and photographs indicating his distinguished career. Sarah sat across from his desk, trying to maintain her composure, while wondering why she had been called for this private meeting. The general studied a file in front of him, occasionally glancing up at her with an expression that was difficult to read. "Specialist Mitchell," he began, setting the file aside. "Your performance during this joint exercise has been exceptional. Your work in intelligence analysis and tactical communications exceeded the standards we typically see from soldiers at your experience level." Sarah felt a surge of pride, but she remained cautious. Compliments were often followed by constructive criticism or redirection in military settings. She waited for him to continue, maintaining the respectful attention that was expected when speaking with senior officers. However, the general continued, "I've also reviewed your overall service record, and I see some significant discrepancies between your recent performance and your earlier evaluations. Captain Williams has noted concerns about your physical fitness scores and your ability to keep up with standard infantry operations." There it was. Sarah had known that her earlier struggles would eventually catch up with her, regardless of her recent improvements. She prepared herself for what felt like an inevitable conversation about transferring to a support role or possibly leaving military service entirely. "I'm curious about something," General Thompson said, leaning back in his chair. "Tell me about your motivation for joining the military. What drove you to choose infantry rather than a support specialty?" The question was unexpected, and Sarah found herself thinking carefully about how to respond. She could provide the standard answer about wanting to serve her country and prove herself capable of any military role. Or she could be honest about her deeper motivations and the personal significance of her military service. "My grandfather served in Vietnam, sir," she said, choosing honesty. He was a Navy combat veteran who always told stories about the importance of standing with your fellow service members when things got difficult. "I joined infantry because I wanted to serve in a role where I could directly support and protect other soldiers." General Thompson nodded thoughtfully. "And how has that worked out for you so far?" Sarah considered the question carefully before answering. "It's been challenging, sir. I've struggled with some aspects of infantry training, particularly the physical requirements. But I've learned that there are different ways to support and protect fellow soldiers, and some of those ways better match my particular skills and abilities." "Interesting perspective," the general said. "Tell me, what do you think your primary strengths are as a soldier?" "I think I'm good at analysis and problem solving under pressure, sir. I pay attention to details that others might miss, and I'm able to maintain situational awareness even when things become chaotic. I've also discovered that I'm effective at tactical communications and intelligence work." The general picked up the file again and flipped through several pages. "Your recent performance certainly supports that assessment. Your intelligence analysis during the reconnaissance mission identified threats that experienced special operations personnel had missed. Your communications work prevented what could have been a serious coordination failure. And your analytical work during the final exercise potentially saved lives by identifying an enemy counterattack." Sarah remained silent, unsure whether these observations were leading toward commendation or redirection. In her experience, military leaders often highlighted positives before delivering difficult news about future assignments or career limitations. General Thompson closed the file and looked directly at her. "I'm going to ask you a personal question, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you believe you belong in a frontline infantry unit?" The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. It was the same doubt that had been haunting her for months, the concern that had been whispered by her fellow soldiers and implied by her training evaluations. She had been asking herself the same question every day since arriving at Fort Campbell. "I believe I can contribute meaningfully to military operations, sir," she said carefully. "Whether that's in a frontline infantry unit or in another capacity depends on how my skills can best be utilized to support the mission and protect fellow soldiers."
"That's a diplomatic answer," the general observed.
"But I asked what you believe, not what you think I want to hear." Sarah took a deep breath and made a decision to be completely honest. "I believe I have valuable skills that can enhance unit effectiveness, sir. But I also recognize that my physical limitations might make me less effective in certain types of infantry operations. I think the question isn't whether I belong in the military, but how my particular combination of strengths and limitations can best serve military objectives." General Thompson smiled slightly, the first time Sarah had seen any change in his serious expression. "Now that's an honest answer, and it tells me something important about your character and your understanding of military service." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the training facilities where soldiers were conducting various exercises. Sarah remained seated, wondering what direction the conversation would take next. "I've been in the military for 28 years, he said without turning around. "I've seen thousands of soldiers come and go, and I've learned to recognize different types of potential. Some soldiers are born for direct combat roles, others excel in support positions. The best military leaders are those who can identify where each person belongs and utilize their capabilities accordingly." He returned to his desk and sat down, his expression becoming more serious again. "What I saw during this exercise was a soldier with exceptional analytical skills, strong communication abilities, and the kind of situational awareness that can't be taught. Those are rare qualities, and they're incredibly valuable in the right operational context." Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she began to understand where the conversation might be heading. The general's comments seemed positive, but she had learned to be cautious about interpreting military feedback. "I am going to make you an offer," General Thompson continued. "There's a position available with the Joint Intelligence Unit that specializes in tactical analysis and operational support. It's a role that would utilize your analytical skills while providing direct support to combat operations. The work is challenging and important, and it would put you in a position to make significant contributions to military missions." Sarah stared at him, hardly believing what she was hearing. A position with the Joint Intelligence Unit represented exactly the kind of opportunity she had hoped for when she first enlisted. It would allow her to serve in a meaningful capacity while utilizing her actual strengths rather than struggling to overcome her limitations. However, the general added, accepting this position would mean leaving your current infantry unit. You would be transitioning to a different career field that would require additional training and a completely different set of responsibilities. The choice was both exciting and terrifying. Accepting the offer would mean acknowledging that she wasn't suited for traditional infantry operations, something that felt like admitting defeat after months of struggling to prove herself. But it would also provide an opportunity to serve in a capacity where she could excel and make meaningful contributions to military operations. "Sir, may I ask how this opportunity came about?" Sarah asked. "Your performance during this exercise caught the attention of several senior officers," the general explained. "Sergeant First Class Santos specifically recommended you for intelligence work based on your reconnaissance performance. Captain Rodriguez noted your communication skills and your ability to maintain situational awareness under pressure, and I personally observed your analytical work during the command post exercise." Sarah felt a wave of gratitude toward the special operations personnel who had worked with her during the exercise. They had seen potential in her that she hadn't fully recognized in herself, and they had been willing to recommend her for advanced opportunities based on her demonstrated capabilities. "The position would require you to complete additional training in intelligence analysis and tactical communications," the general continued. "You'd be working with some of the military's most experienced intelligence professionals, and the work would directly support special operations and conventional forces in complex operational environments." The opportunity sounded exactly like what Sarah had been hoping to find in military service. Challenging work that utilized her skills while supporting fellow soldiers in meaningful ways. But she also recognized that accepting the offer would represent a significant departure from her original goals and expectations. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, and I'm honored to be considered for this position," Sarah said. "May I ask for some time to consider the opportunity and discuss it with my family?" "Of course," the general replied. "This is a significant decision that shouldn't be made hastily. Take the time you need to think it through carefully. But I will say this. Opportunities like this don't come along often, and the military needs people with your particular combination of skills and character." As Sarah prepared to leave the general's office, he stood up and extended his hand. "Regardless of your decision about the intelligence position, I want you to know that your performance during this exercise has changed some people's perceptions about your capabilities. You've demonstrated that you have valuable skills and the character to serve effectively in challenging roles." The handshake felt significant, representing recognition from one of the military's most respected leaders. As Sarah left the office, her mind was racing with thoughts about the opportunity and what it might mean for her future. The decision would require careful consideration, but for the first time since enlisting, she felt like she had a clear path forward that would allow her to serve effectively while utilizing her actual strengths. That evening, Sarah found herself sitting in the base recreation area, staring at her phone and trying to decide how to explain the day's developments to her family. Lisa found her there and sat down beside her, immediately noticing her contemplative mood. "You look like someone who's had an interesting day," Lisa observed. "Everything okay?" Sarah explained the meeting with General Thompson and the opportunity he had presented. Lisa listened without interruption, her expression showing a mixture of excitement and concern as Sarah described the potential intelligence position. "That sounds like an amazing opportunity," Lisa said when Sarah finished. "It's exactly the kind of work you're good at, and it would put you in a position to really make a difference. But it also means admitting that I can't hack it in infantry," Sarah replied. "It feels like giving up on everything I originally wanted to accomplish."
Lisa shook her head firmly.
"It's not giving up. It's recognizing your strengths and finding a way to use them effectively. The military needs people who can do intelligence analysis just as much as it needs people who can kick in doors. Maybe more, actually." The conversation helped clarify Sarah's thinking, but she still felt the need to discuss the opportunity with her family before making a final decision. That night, she called her parents and her brother David, explaining the situation and asking for their advice. Her parents were supportive but cautious, encouraging her to carefully consider all aspects of the opportunity before making a decision. David, however, was immediately enthusiastic about the intelligence position. "Sarah, that sounds incredible," he said over the phone. "You'd be doing exactly the kind of analytical work you've always been good at, but in a military context where it really matters. Grandpa would be proud of you for finding a way to serve that matches your abilities." The mention of their grandfather reminded Sarah of her anchor tattoo and the motivation that had originally driven her to enlist. She had joined the military to serve something larger than herself, and to honor the family tradition of military service. The intelligence position would allow her to accomplish both of those goals, just in a different way than she had originally envisioned. As she prepared for bed, Sarah realized that the decision had already been made in her heart. The intelligence position represented everything she had been hoping to find in military service: challenging work, meaningful contributions, and the opportunity to support fellow soldiers in ways that utilized her actual capabilities. The next morning, she would return to General Thompson's office and accept his offer. But first, she rolled up her sleeve and looked at her anchor tattoo one more time. "Steady as she goes," she whispered, remembering her grandfather's words. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter in her military career, one that would allow her to serve effectively while being true to her own strengths and abilities. Sarah arrived at General Thompson's office early the next morning, having made her decision during the restless hours of the previous night. She had thought about her grandfather's stories, her own motivations for joining the military, and the opportunity to serve in a capacity that would truly utilize her strengths. As she waited in the outer office, she felt a sense of calm determination that had been missing during her months of struggling to prove herself in traditional infantry roles. When the general called her in, his expression suggested that he had a good idea what her decision would be. Sarah entered and stood at attention, waiting for permission to speak. "At ease, Specialist," he said, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I assume you've had time to consider the intelligence position we discussed yesterday." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied. "I would be honored to accept the position and begin the additional training required for intelligence work." General Thompson nodded approvingly. "I thought that might be your decision. It's the right choice, both for you and for the military. Your skills are better suited for analytical work than for traditional infantry operations, and frankly, we need people with your capabilities in intelligence roles."
He pulled out a different file and began explaining the details of her new assignment.
The position would require her to complete an intensive 12-week training program at the Military Intelligence Center, followed by assignment to a joint task force that provided analytical support to both special operations and conventional forces. The work would be challenging and important, with direct impact on operational planning and mission success. As the general explained the training requirements and job responsibilities, Sarah felt a growing sense of excitement about the opportunities ahead. For the first time since enlisting, she was looking at a military career that would challenge her intellectually while allowing her to make meaningful contributions to mission success. The work would be demanding, but it would demand the kinds of skills she actually possessed rather than requiring her to overcome fundamental limitations. "There is one more thing," General Thompson said as they concluded the discussion of her new assignment. "I'd like you to participate in a brief ceremony this afternoon where we'll be recognizing several soldiers for their performance during the joint exercise. Your analytical work deserves formal recognition." Sarah was surprised by the announcement. She had not expected any formal recognition beyond the private feedback she had already received. The idea of being recognized alongside other soldiers for her contributions felt almost surreal after months of being considered the weak link in her unit. The ceremony was held in the main auditorium, with representatives from various units in attendance. Sarah found herself seated with several other soldiers who were being recognized for different aspects of their performance during the exercise. As she looked around the room, she saw Captain Williams and members of her original unit in the audience, their expressions showing a mixture of surprise and respect. When General Thompson began presenting the recognition awards, he spoke about the importance of identifying and developing different types of talent within the military. He emphasized that effective operations required soldiers with diverse skills and specializations, and that the military's strength came from utilizing each person's capabilities in appropriate roles. Specialist Sarah Mitchell, he announced when her turn came, is being recognized for exceptional performance in intelligence analysis and tactical communications during our joint exercise. Her analytical work identified critical threats that experienced personnel had missed, and her communications expertise prevented coordination failures that could have compromised mission success. As Sarah walked to the front of the auditorium to receive her recognition, she could see the surprise on the faces of her original unit members. These were the same soldiers who had called her Deadweight just days earlier, and now she was being formally recognized by one of the military's most senior leaders for contributions that had enhanced mission effectiveness. General Thompson shook her hand and presented her with a certificate of commendation, but as he did so, he noticed something that made him pause. Sarah's uniform sleeve had shifted slightly during the handshake, revealing the edge of her anchor tattoo on her left wrist. The general's expression changed as he caught sight of the ink, his eyes focusing on the partially visible design. "Specialist Mitchell," he said quietly, "may I ask about your tattoo?" Sarah felt a moment of concern, wondering if having a visible tattoo might somehow affect her recognition or her new assignment. Military regulations regarding tattoos had evolved over the years, but they could still be a source of scrutiny from senior leadership. "It's an anchor design, sir," she replied. "I got it after basic training as a reminder of family military tradition. May I see it?" the general asked, his tone suggesting genuine interest rather than criticism. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then rolled up her sleeve to reveal the complete tattoo. The anchor was clearly visible, surrounded by the words, "Steady as she goes," in elegant script. The design was simple but meaningful, representing the values and motivations that had driven her decision to enlist. General Thompson studied the tattoo for several seconds, his expression becoming increasingly serious. When he looked up at Sarah, there was something in his eyes that she had not seen before. A mixture of surprise, recognition, and what appeared to be deep emotion.
"Where did you get that phrase?" he asked quietly.
"It was something my grandfather used to say, sir," Sarah replied. "He served in Vietnam with the Navy, and he would use that phrase when things got difficult. It was his way of reminding people to stay focused and maintain their course even when circumstances became challenging." The general continued staring at the tattoo, his expression showing an internal struggle that Sarah could not understand. Finally, he looked up at her again, his voice barely audible, as he asked his next question. "What was your grandfather's name?" "Petty Officer First Class Robert Mitchell, sir," Sarah answered. "He served on river patrol boats in the Mekong Delta from 1968 to 1970. General Thompson's reaction was immediate and profound. His face went pale, and he took a step backward, as if he had been physically struck. For a moment he appeared unable to speak, his eyes moving between Sarah's face and her tattoo, as if trying to process information that seemed impossible to believe. "Robert Mitchell," he repeated slowly. "Bobby Mitchell from Ohio." Sarah stared at him in confusion. "Yes, sir. Did you know my grandfather?" The general continued looking at her with an expression of disbelief, as if he was seeing a ghost. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion that he was struggling to control. "Bobby Mitchell saved my life in Vietnam," he said. "I was a young lieutenant on my first deployment, and our patrol boat was ambushed in a narrow canal. I was wounded and trapped under debris when the boat started taking water. Your grandfather pulled me out and kept me afloat until help arrived, even though he was wounded himself." The auditorium had fallen silent, as people nearby began to realize that something significant was happening. Sarah felt her own emotions rising as she began to understand the magnitude of what was being revealed. "He never stopped talking about family and the importance of steady navigation through difficult waters," General Thompson continued. "That phrase, 'steady as she goes,' was something he said constantly. It became a motto for our entire unit after that ambush. We all adopted it because Bobby Mitchell embodied everything it represented." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she listened to the general's story. Her grandfather had died when she was 16, but his influence on her life had been profound. Hearing about his heroism from someone who had directly benefited from his actions felt like receiving a message from beyond the grave. "He talked about you, sir," Sarah said, her voice barely steady. He never mentioned specific names, but he told stories about a young officer he helped during an ambush. He said that officer went on to have a distinguished career, and that helping him was one of the most important things he ever did. General Thompson's composure finally broke, and tears began streaming down his face as he listened to Sarah's words. The sight of this distinguished military leader showing such raw emotion had a profound impact on everyone in the auditorium, creating a moment of shared humanity that transcended rank and protocol. "Your grandfather was the finest soldier I ever served with," the general said, his voice breaking with emotion. "He taught me more about leadership, courage, and selfless service in a few months than I had learned in years of training. Everything I accomplished in my career was built on the foundation of what he showed me about being a soldier and a human being." The recognition ceremony had transformed into something far more personal and meaningful than anyone had anticipated. Sarah found herself at the center of a moment that connected her family's military legacy with her own service in ways she had never imagined possible. "The fact that you're here, serving with the same values and the same commitment that your grandfather showed, is not a coincidence," General Thompson continued. "It's a testament to the kind of man he was and the legacy he left. You carry his dedication to service, his analytical mind, and his ability to contribute in ways that make everyone around him better." As the general composed himself and the ceremony concluded, Sarah realized that everything had changed. She was no longer just another soldier struggling to find her place in the military. She was the granddaughter of a hero who had shaped the career of one of the military's most distinguished leaders. Her own struggles and eventual success had taken on new meaning as part of a larger story of service and sacrifice that spanned generations.
In the days that followed, as Sarah prepared to begin her intelligence training, she reflected on the extraordinary series of events that had led to this moment.
She had started as someone labeled deadweight by her peers, struggled through months of training that seemed designed to highlight her limitations, and eventually found recognition for the skills and character traits that had always been her strengths. The revelation about her grandfather's impact on General Thompson's life had provided context for her own military service that she had never expected.
She was not just serving her country. She was continuing a tradition of selfless service that had already touched the lives of people in ways she was only beginning to understand. As she packed her belongings for the move to intelligence training, Sarah looked once more at her anchor tattoo.
The phrase, "steady as she goes," had taken on new significance, connecting her not only to her grandfather's memory, but also to the larger community of soldiers who had been inspired by his example. Her journey from deadweight to recognized contributor had been difficult and uncertain, but it had ultimately led her to exactly where she belonged. The story of Sarah Mitchell and her grandfather's tattoo would become legend within military circles, a reminder that service takes many forms, and that recognition often comes in the most unexpected ways. But for Sarah herself, it was simply the beginning of a career that would honor both her grandfather's legacy and her own unique contributions to the mission of keeping her fellow soldiers safe and the nation secure. Her path had been different from what she originally envisioned, but it had led her to a place where she could serve effectively while staying true to the values that had brought her to the military in the first place. Sometimes the most important journeys are the ones that teach us not just where we're going, but who we're meant to become along the way.